Have you ever walked past a thriving tomato plant in late summer and thought, why can't my pepper plants look like that year after year? I've been there, standing in the garden feeling like I'm missing something. You watch the season wind down, temperatures start to drop, and before you know it, you're pulling up plants that still have green on them, tossing them out and telling yourself you'll do better next year. But what if that cycle is costing you more than you realize? Not just in money, but in time, effort, and harvests you never actually got to enjoy. Here's something that stopped me cold the first time I heard it. My own bell pepper plant, the one sitting just outside my back door right now, is going on its 4th growing season. 4 years from the same plant, and it's still loaded with fruit every single summer, like clockwork. You see, peppers don't actually belong in the annual category, where most of us have mentally filed them. In their home environment across South America, they grow as perennials, coming back year after year, sometimes living 5, 6, even 7 years with the right conditions. Garden centres slot them into the seasonal section because buying new transplants every spring is great for their bottom line. But it doesn't have to be great for yours. Here's the core biology you need to understand. Peppers are warm weather plants through and through. Anything below 50 degrees and they start shutting down. Drop to 32 and frost becomes a real threat.
But between those two thresholds is a window most gardeners miss entirely. Keep your pepper plant just above freezing and it doesn't die. It simply pauses. It goes into a kind of dormancy, conserving energy until warmth returns. And when it wakes back up in spring, it doesn't start from zero like a tiny seedling. It picks up right where it left off, with a fully developed root system that took years to build. That translates into blooms arriving nearly 2 months ahead of a first-year plant, and harvests that can be twice the size compared to starting fresh every season. I used to dig plants out of the ground every fall. I'd haul them inside, make a complete mess of the floor, and half the time they wouldn't survive the transplant shock anyway. It was exhausting, and the results were inconsistent at best. That's why I switched completely to what I call the permanent container method. No digging, no backstrain, no mess. And as a bonus, deer and rodents have a much harder time getting to your plants. It's a cleaner, smarter way to grow that actually fits into real life. Go ahead and pour yourself something warm before we get into the specifics, because once these pieces click into place, your whole approach to growing peppers will shift. Let's start with the one thing that trips up most gardeners before they even get going. For years, we've been told that plants belong in the ground. It's intuitive, it feels natural, and for a lot of vegetables, it's perfectly fine.
But if your goal is to keep a pepper plant alive and productive for multiple years, putting it in the ground works against you. Every fall, if it's staying alive, it has to come out. And every time you dig it up, you're tearing through the fine feeder roots that took all season to develop. That kind of damage adds up. The plant spends weeks just recovering from the move instead of storing energy for the following year. The solution is to put your pepper in a container from day one. And the container you choose matters more than most people think. Small pots are the most common mistake. Peppers build surprisingly large root systems over time, and cramped roots mean a stressed plant that produces less fruit. You want a minimum of 5 gallons to start, but 7 to 10 gallons gives the roots the room they need to really develop. Depth is just as important as volume. Aim for at least 12 inches of growing depth so roots can spread downward without hitting a wall. One small addition that makes a surprisingly big difference: put your container on a wheeled plant dolly. Sounds minor, but being able to roll your plant around changes everything. Chase the sun in summer. Tuck it under an overhang when storms roll in. And when the first cold nights arrive, just wheel it straight inside. The plant barely notices the transition, which means no shock, no setback, and much smoother winter dormancy. I've heard from gardeners who said this one change alone made them stick with the method after years of giving up. No heavy lifting, no wrestling a root-bound plant out of frozen ground. Just a smooth roll indoors. Self-watering containers are also worth considering if you're starting fresh.
They keep moisture levels steady, which takes some of the guesswork out of watering and reduces stress on the plant during hot spells. The next piece of the puzzle is the growing medium itself. This is where a lot of container gardeners quietly go wrong. Scooping regular garden soil into a pot seems logical, but it compacts over time, starving the roots of oxygen and creating drainage problems that slowly kill the plant. What you actually need is a mix that stays light and loose even after months of watering. Think of it as building a growing environment that mimics the well-drained, warm soils peppers naturally thrive in. A quality mix balances good drainage with genuine nutrient content. Something light and airy as the base, paired with rich organic matter, and a drainage-improving amendment like perlite. When water moves freely through the soil and air can reach the roots, the plant can put its energy into growth and fruit instead of fighting off root problems. Adding compost brings a slow, steady supply of nutrients, while perlite prevents the waterlogging that causes peppers to drop flowers and stall out. Getting the soil right is one of those foundational decisions that pays dividends every single season. You can even work mycorrhizal fungi into the mix at planting time to encourage a stronger, more efficient root network right from the start. Then comes a step that feels completely wrong the first time you do it.
When your young plant reaches about 6 to 8 inches tall and has developed a few leaf sets, you cut the top off. Not because something went wrong, intentionally. Left on its own, a pepper plant grows straight up, tall and narrow. That shape looks healthy, but it creates real problems later when the plant is loaded with fruit and doesn't have the structural strength to hold it all up. Cutting the main growing tip redirects the plant's energy outward. New branches form below the cut, usually developing into that classic forked Y shape that forms a much sturdier frame. More branches mean more fruiting points, better airflow through the plant, and a lower disease risk overall. It's worth using clean, sterilized tools when you make the cut to avoid introducing bacteria or fungal issues. Cut just above a leaf node and keep the edges clean. If the plant already has some side branching, you can pinch those tips too for even denser growth. The first time I did this, I genuinely thought I'd ruined a perfectly good plant. It sat there looking bare and sad for almost 2 weeks. Then new shoots started emerging, and the plant came back thicker, more compact, and absolutely covered in flower buds. It was one of those moments where you realize why experienced growers keep doing something that seems counterintuitive. Skipping this step produces plants that look fine early and then struggle later, leaning sideways under the weight of their own harvest. Taking the time to shape your plant properly in those early weeks sets it up for years of strong production. Secret number 4. Alright, let's get into harvest timing, because this is where a lot of growers unknowingly put the brakes on their own production right when things are going well. There's a moment every pepper grower knows. The fruit turns glossy, shifts from green toward that deep red, and it's almost impossible not to leave it on the plant just a little longer to fully ripen. But here's what's actually happening when a pepper goes fully red. The plant registers that its seeds have matured. From a biological standpoint, the mission is complete. In response, hormones shift, flower production slows, and new fruit set often stops almost entirely. That gorgeous red pepper is essentially the plant's way of taking a bow. So if you want continuous production all season long, once this harvesting rhythm becomes second nature, your plants shift into a kind of sustained production mode that just keeps running week after week. It's a small behavioral shift that has an outsized impact. Now, let's talk about keeping your plants safe, because none of this effort matters if something gets to them overnight. Imagine checking on a plant that's been growing for 3 seasons, loaded with fruit and looking better than ever, and coming back the next morning to bare stems. Deer, rabbits, groundhogs, and mice are all capable of that kind of damage in a single night. I've heard stories that genuinely hurt to listen to. Years of work, gone in a few hours.
This is another place where the container method gives you a real structural advantage. Getting your pots up off the ground eliminates most of the risk. A porch, a raised deck, a balcony, even a sturdy garden table puts your plants out of reach for the majority of animal visitors. Deer are cautious around steps and tight spaces near buildings. They tend to keep their distance from areas with regular human movement. Smaller animals like rabbits and mice prefer covered approaches and will typically avoid crossing open, exposed areas without shelter. Elevation costs nothing and removes the threat almost completely, and your plants end up closer to the door, which makes harvesting and daily care far more convenient. No more hiking to the back of the yard to check on things. For additional protection, marigolds planted nearby or directly in the same container do double duty. Their scent discourages aphids and whiteflies while attracting the pollinators your pepper plants depend on. Function and colour at the same time. One common mistake worth mentioning: relying on low garden fencing while still keeping plants in the ground. Most animals either jump standard fences easily or simply dig underneath them. Containers combined with elevation sidestep that problem entirely without any fencing needed. Now let's cover feeding, because long-term plants need a long-term nutrition strategy. Perennial peppers aren't running a sprint. They're in a year-long marathon, and what you feed them needs to reflect that. Heavy doses of nitrogen fertilizer are the most common mistake. Rich green growth looks impressive, but nitrogen-heavy feeding tends to suppress flowering and fruiting. You end up with a lush, leafy plant and a disappointing harvest. That's the opposite of the goal. One highly effective addition is Epsom salt, used on a monthly schedule through the growing season. It supplies magnesium, which peppers need for photosynthesis.
The final piece is winter preparation, and with the container method, it's genuinely straightforward compared to the alternative. When nighttime temperatures start reaching around 50 degrees, it's time to move your plant inside. No digging, no root disturbance, just roll the container in. Before bringing it indoors, do a quick pest check. Aphids and spider mites like to hide under leaves and along stems. Give the plant a gentle rinse and treat any visible issues before they come inside with you. Then do a light prune. Remove yellowing leaves, any damaged stems, and harvest everything that's left on the plant. Keep it brief. Heavy cutting at this stage does more harm than good. Leaving the plant's structure mostly intact helps it recover faster in spring. Find a bright indoor location. A south-facing window is ideal. If natural light is limited, a simple grow light suspended above the plant can fill that gap. Keep lighting consistent each day to support steady dormancy rather than erratic waking. Cut back watering significantly during this period. Water only when the top few inches of soil are dry to the touch. Overwatering a dormant pepper is one of the fastest ways to lose it. Some leaf drop is completely normal after moving inside. The plant is adjusting. Keep temperatures moderate and stable, let it rest, and watch for the first signs of new growth pushing through. That's your signal that spring is coming and the plant is ready to go again. Adding a thin layer of compost or mulch across the top of the soil helps retain